Today, I'm excited to welcome Bitcoin and NOSTR advocate Kyle Sylvestre to the podcast. Welcome to the Bitcoin Edge, Kyle.
Hi, Paula. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to have the chance to speak with you and just chat about Bitcoin and NOSTR and just have a good, casual, laid-back chat and hopefully teach somebody something new and just explore Bitcoin and NOSTR together.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad to have you here. It was nice meeting you on NOSTR and to hear that you're recently new in the Bitcoin space. I'm really interested to hear how that went for you. But first, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you were born, where you're living, and what you're doing with your time.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I was born in California around the Santa Monica area. That's where I spent most of my childhood. Spent many days at the beach being a kid. That's probably the highlight of my childhood. When I was about 10, 11 years old, I actually moved to Las Vegas, Nevada, and actually spent a majority of my life there up until recently. Back in 2021, the tail end of 2021, I actually moved up to Spokane, Washington to be closer to family. Spokane was a good middle ground between some family that I have in Oregon and some family that's here as well.
Okay, nice. So tell us how you found Bitcoin.
Well, it actually starts all the way back in 2021, shortly before I moved up to Spokane, Washington. It all started with a text message. It was my brother who got me into Bitcoin. My wife and I, we had just welcomed our daughter, newborn at the time, Adelaide. And I remember getting a text from him. It was a pretty lengthy text, but it was a text about something called Bitcoin. And I had heard about it through media and whatnot, but didn't really know anything about it. But to summarize the text, it was pretty much an invite to come check out Bitcoin and explore it. There were some helpful links that my brother had given me. But it wasn't until about September, if I'm recalling correctly, of that year, September 2021, that I actually purchased my first sats through Swan Bitcoin. And I did that for about several months. I was dollar cost averaging on a daily basis. But unfortunately, I stopped in January of 2022. I had just moved up to Spokane. Money was a little tight, but if we're also being honest, I didn't believe in it enough back then. So I stopped for about a couple years. And it wasn't until this year, in March, that I would really like to consider that this is when I became a Bitcoiner. Yes, I was stacking sats back in 2021, early 2022, but it wasn't until this year that I would really consider myself a Bitcoiner. And the catalyst, funny enough, was BlackRock and their ETF. There's a lot of media coverage I was seeing on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. And that was kind of the thing that made me give Bitcoin a second look, funny enough. And my reasoning behind it was you have this huge multinational conglomerate corporation company purchasing Bitcoin in massive amounts that, someone normal like myself, it's hard to quantify, especially when you don't really know much about Bitcoin, but they were buying an insanely large amount of Bitcoin. And for me, it was follow the money. And so it didn't make sense for me to not custody Bitcoin or purchase Bitcoin when you have this huge company, a very successful company, purchasing it. So if they're doing it, there must be something there. And it was a wrap. After that, I started going down the rabbit hole, as they say, and I've been a Bitcoiner for about 7 months now.
Well, that's wonderful. So BlackRock was the second touch point for you. Your brother was the first, which probably helped, right? Because if you just heard BlackRock say, here's Bitcoin, you might not have been as convinced as because your brother said it earlier.
You're correct, yes. So it's because of the seeds that my brother had planted in me all those years ago, where I was in tune with just the name Bitcoin. And of course, I had never sold my coins. I'd always kept them on an exchange, which I know is a huge no in the Bitcoin space. I had left them on the exchange for some time. Happy to say I'm cold storaging everything now. But it's because of my brother and the conversations that he had with me that I'm really here today speaking to you. had he not planted those seeds and spent his time teaching me and what he knew about it. So very thankful to my brother.
So, when you heard that BlackRock was buying, were there other things in your life that made you think this would be a good thing to do? Have you been noticing inflation increasing, other things like that?
Yes. Now, for the most part, I don't like to get political. I think, everyone is free to their own political choices. But at the same time, there is a stark reality that I feel that our purchasing power is essentially being eroded away with money printing. And so I had noticed that in my own life where my dollar wasn't going as far as, I needed it to. Of course, I'm married to my beautiful wife, Samantha, and we have 3 children. And so we have an expensive household, you would say, with 3 little ones to feed. And so I think I noticed it the most in the grocery bill, like most people in the country. And so funny enough, Bitcoin for me was about the gains. And in some way it still is. But over the past 7 months in my journey, it's become a little bit more than just something to get rich on, so to speak. I think that's how a lot of us get into the spaces. We come for the gains, but we end up finding that there's so much more to the Bitcoin technology than just getting rich in a matter of speaking. So it's become a store of value for me.
Yes, I agree. I also came initially for the gains and stayed for revolution, as they say.
Right. I've heard that, yes.
Tell us some of the other things that Bitcoin has taught you so far.
It's really taught me about the money system, and I won't pretend that I'm the most knowledgeable about the economy or money or finances or the theory of money or all those little, subjects that can crop up when we talk about these things. But it's really just taught me about, specifically here in the United States, that there's nothing backing the money that's printed anymore. That we've been off that standard for a long time. I think, if I recall correctly, it's 1971. I think we went off the gold standard. So the money supply is theoretically infinite at this point. And how can something infinite be valuable? That's one thing I tell some of my friends and family. And a lot of my kids sometimes, they don't get it though. They're 6 and 3. But I tell them now because they're going to be Bitcoiners one day. But Bitcoin's just really taught me about, how we're printing money in ways that we've never done before in this country. And as our government continues to print more and more money, the value of our money is eroding away. And so with Bitcoin's taught me that. I wouldn't have known that any other way. And I didn't know it back in 2021, but I learned it this year. And now that I'm awake to what the reality of our money is, it's impossible to go back.
Once you see it, you can't go back, right?
Correct, right.
So, if you were going to talk to some friends or family who didn't know anything about Bitcoin, where would you start?
I think the best way to orange pill or make newer Bitcoiners is, all the other rabbit hole things to be discovered can come later. I think the best way is to approach it from an investment or gain standpoint. I think that's how everyone enters the space, is you're enticed by the gains. I don't think there's another asset or commodity like currency out there, electronic cash, that has delivered the gains that Bitcoin has in the past 15 years. I can't think of one. And so I think that's the best way to approach it. I think as of this morning, Bitcoin's hovering somewhere around 68,000 a coin. That, since its inception back in 2009, that's incredible if you think about it. There's nothing else that's delivering it. Sure, Bitcoin's had a couple rough years in between that 15 where it wasn't the top performing asset that year, but for the other years, I think it was only 2 years, but for the remainder of 13, 14 years, it's been the apex. So it doesn't make sense to almost invest in anything else. I don't own any stocks. I don't know if I ever will. Bitcoin's the first chance I feel that I have to actually grow my money or transport value to myself and my children in the future.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Do you invest in anything else? But
Yeah, yeah, definitely don't invest in anything else. I frankly don't know enough about it too. Bitcoin's been my only, I guess, venture into that realm of investing, I guess you could say. But for me, it's Bitcoin. I don't foresee myself doing any other stocks. Eventually I'd like to own real estate. But for now, it's Bitcoin. It's a good first stepping stone for me and my family. And if I diversify in the future, great. If not, I have Bitcoin.
that's wonderful. It's so good to get started while you're a young family. And your wife's obviously on board too, right?
Yes, yeah. She, for the most part, she lets me be. She's my sounding board. She's been one of my greatest inspirations and supporters, and she lets me definitely take the lead with the Bitcoin stuff because, fair enough, it can get confusing. Especially you're diving down into code and cryptography, and just to normal everyday people, it's a lot to digest. But yes, she understands the merits of it, the fundamentals of it, and she's my greatest supporter. So I love you, Samantha.
So it sounds like you have a very supportive wife, and she obviously trusts you because you have also, given her reason to do that. So
Yes.
good on you for that. So tell us a little bit more about your Bitcoin rabbit hole. Who are some of your biggest influences in the Bitcoin space?
So, and I had just made a post about this or a note about this on NOSTR just the other day. Dante Cook, he used to be with Swan Bitcoin. I think he's now with Simply Bitcoin. I know Swan went through some changes this year, but he was one of the first individuals that I watch on a daily basis to learn about Bitcoin. And so I'm glad to see that he's moved on to another venture and he's doing well. I suppose second would be Matthew Kratter with Bitcoin University. That's a good one. I was watching that on a daily basis as well. I still tune into his videos every now and then, but I just love the way that he explained Bitcoin. It was really easy to follow, and I've actually forwarded a lot of his content to people that I was trying to bring into the Bitcoin space or to help educate. And so, again, without Dante's content, without Matthew Kratter's content, I feel like that would have been difficult for me to try to educate people. And then of course my family, of course, is a inspiration to me as well. Without their support and love and just listening to me go on about Bitcoin, I don't think I would be as inspired to learn about this technology. And then, of course, I've made connections with a lot of local Bitcoiners here, all through the Orange Pill app. So that's been really cool. And that's honestly how I found NOSTR. I met an individual on the Orange Pill app who was doing some pretty big things here in Spokane. They have their own, I suppose I guess you could call it like an educational system here. It's called Pacific Northwest Bitcoin. And I met him through the Orange Pill app. And through meeting him, I was able to meet other Bitcoiners. And we just had an event here recently in town that was organized through the Orange Pill app. And that was so fun. So there's just been so many people, whether it's Bitcoiners or my family or content creators, that it's because of them that I am where I am now. And I can only hope that I can be that inspiration for someone now, and just to make more Bitcoiners and just honestly teach people. I think we're all here to learn something. If we all just stop and listen and make connections.
Yeah, those are some really good people you mentioned, and you're right. There's so many good people in the Bitcoin space. Orange Pill app. I'm actually going to interview one of the founders. I don't know if he is the actual founder, Brian Dement.
I'm not aware of the name, but that's amazing.
Yeah, next week. So I'm actually
Okay, great. I'm tuning
yeah
into that one.
I'll let you know because I'm going to ask some questions because the Orange Pill app is an app where you actually have to. It's a paid subscription, right?
Right, right.
But it's obviously worth it.
I'm not entirely sure if it's free. If I recall correctly, my subscriptions the price of a really cheap cup of coffee. It's like $2.99. And so why not? For
Exactly.
$3, you can connect with a bunch of Bitcoiners. It's 100% worth it to join the Orange Pill app.
To meet quality people, yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm interested to speak with him. And then I also really enjoyed Dante Cook. And I was surprised that Swan Bitcoin let him go. He was so good. But I'm glad to see that he's gone on his own. And, everything happens the way it's meant to happen. Maybe it was best for Swan and best for Dante.
Right, right. And I'll admit, I don't know the full story about what happened with Swan. Swan was the first exchange that I bought Bitcoin on. They were always very good to me. I never had problems with them. So it was rough to see them go through the layoffs, and then Pacific Bitcoin was canceled. But I want to see them succeed, no matter. Everyone has setbacks. So I want to see them succeed. Of course, I want to see Dante succeed. It seems to be that he's doing all right now. But yeah, hopefully they bounce back.
I'm sure they will. And have you seen the documentary God Bless Bitcoin?
I actually haven't, and I should. I have a poor excuse. I'm just tired by the end of the day with three little ones. But I've been wanting to see that. Apparently, there's another one on HBO Max. Another documentary came out. But I've been meaning to see these documentaries. But I feel like such an old man. Sometimes by like 9 o'clock, when everyone's asleep, I'm finished.
Trust me, I'm asleep by 9 p.m.
Yeah.
too. But the reason, I started watching God Bless Bitcoin and I
Okay.
was watching the wrong one. It is free on YouTube. And
Okay.
until I interviewed Allison, the yoga instructor, last week, and she told me about it. So I tried again because she said how good it was. And this time I watched the right one, and Natalie Brunel is the host. But
Right.
that documentary is one of the best Orange Pill documentaries. It is so well done. Everybody's in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I
Well,
just
you
watched
sold it for me.
10 minutes. I watch 10 minutes at a time because I'm like you. I'm watching so much other stuff and doing so much other stuff, but 10 minutes at a time. And I will watch it many times.
That's great. And I actually had no idea that Natalie Brunel was the host of that. So that's great, Natalie. Just to backtrack, I want to give due credit to her too. It was one of her first videos on Swan. Swan had a little section to educate Bitcoiners if it was your first time into the space, and she had a little video there. And so she was pivotal in my journey as well. So that's great that she went on to that. So I'll have to check it out.
Yeah. So tell us why you like Nostr so much. Are you also on X or do you mostly spend time on Nostr?
So it was X first, X before anything else. Before I joined, or that was the first step in I guess my social media journey, if you will. So I joined X with the goal of connecting with other Bitcoiners. I know there was a lot of content creators on there that were posting daily. And I just wanted to learn more, and I was hoping to connect with others that way. And this, of course, is before Orange Pill app. And I found with X that it was very hard for me to connect with people. The algorithm, if you will. I was such a small fry, I guess, in that space. I have no followers. I don't have any content. I'm just looking to have conversations. And so I felt like I couldn't reach anyone, and I think that's the thing with algorithms on social media is that unless you're trending or getting a lot of views or talking about what they're talking about, you're not going to get any type of buzz. And of course, it wasn't to get famous or anything like that. I just wanted to talk to people because I didn't have anyone to talk to about Bitcoin at the time. And so I didn't really have the best experience with X. I'm still on there now, but I don't really do anything on there anymore. And then that's how I found Orange Pill app. And then from there, I ended up getting into NOSTR because I had heard NOSTR a lot. Matthew Cratter from Bitcoin University, he's the reason why I'm on NOSTR, kept talking about it in his video. So I looked it up and ended up getting onto NOSTR. But in regards to NOSTR, I have been there for a little over a month now. And the reason why I love NOSTR so much is because of how simple it is. There's no algorithm. And so it is completely up to you to make those connections. There's no algorithm that is, throttling me or limiting my reach. That is up to me. So having the control to be able to make those connections, and instead of just hoping on some AI algorithm to do that for me, that was a big draw. Another reason was that there were no sponsored ads. I have a personal Facebook as well, and I don't use it anymore because I can't scroll in my feed anymore without being sold something every 2 to 3 posts in a sponsored app, or seeing things that I'm not even interested in. And so with NOSTR, there's no algorithm. It's simple. There's no ads. And it's a space of really like-minded individuals. And I love the community. They're super helpful. You can ask a question via hashtags, and someone, for the most part, will help you. And there's just a lot of cool content on there, a lot of cool people. And so I'm excited to be part of that space and explore it a little.
Yeah, it really is cool. And also, when you start posting content that gives people value, you can get zapped sats. So you can
That
actually easier than say an X.
Absolutely, yeah. So Bitcoin seems to be built natively into the Nostr protocol, which is a big plus, being a Bitcoiner, of course. But that's the cool thing about Nostr as well, is that it's not just a Bitcoin only space. Yes, you get paid in Bitcoin for your content, but I see people talking about food and photography. So there is a space for everyone on Nostr. Bring yourself there and honestly just be genuine, share yourself there. And not only do you get to share it with like-minded individuals, you get paid in Bitcoin. So that's a win-win.
And you mentioned that you might be looking to do something in the Bitcoin space. What area do you think interests you the most?
That's a tough question. I'm still deciding on how I want to help. Essentially, I've thought about the podcast route, kind of like you. That seems like that would be a good way to chat with interesting people and just teach people about Bitcoin in my own way. Then I've also thought about doing stuff locally, perhaps reaching out to my community, local politicians, and just trying to have conversations about it. I think that's some of the best way to effect change is locally. I think all elections and are important, but I think the ones that we tend to ignore the most are the ones that happen around us. We're so focused on the big one that's coming up, but I don't know if a lot of people can say they vote locally for their leaders or have conversations about stuff like this. And so I think I might be leaning more towards the local aspect, and just trying to help educate people here. I'm not sure if you're aware there's an office in Santa Monica. So actually, they have a Bitcoin office there through the proof of workforce. And I just thought that was so cool that I would love something like that up here. And so maybe I'll reach out to them, get some resources, get some pointers on how I would do that, because I don't know how I would even tackle having those conversations with people. So I haven't really decided where I want to go. I just know that I want to talk about Bitcoin, talk about Nostr, and just try to show people where we're going. Like, this is the future. I really believe that.
I agree. I think you would be great in a podcast or great with people. You seem very friendly and your heart's in the right place. So
Oh, thank
you'll
you. I appreciate that.
you'll know in time. I wanted to start a podcast for a long time and I kept making excuses. I'm too old for this. I don't have the right equipment. All many different excuses in my mind. And then finally I said, I'm not enjoying my job that much. I am just going to do it because I believe in it so much. And I don't know how to reach the people that I really love. So I'm going to work with the people who want to hear it. And, anyone can come to the podcast. But,
I think that's amazing. That just
yeah.
serves as a testament to, I think, your skill. I think you're doing great, obviously, with this podcast. And, it wasn't until this morning that I was like, she's on YouTube as well. So you're doing amazing. And honestly, you're a next person in my list for inspiration. So thank you really
Well,
for having me on and talking with me and just inspiring me.
Well, thank you. I know you're going to do great in this space. And one other
Thank you.
reason I didn't think I would do it, because I don't know if on my podcast I talked about I sold my apartment pretty much for Bitcoin, because you mentioned earlier Bitcoin beats every investment. I'm
Mhm.
in real estate, and you know there's sites like Priced in Bitcoin, and you can see that every asset is falling when priced in Bitcoin. And when you
Mhm.
talk to people like Jeff Booth and people who are very smart and say everything is falling when priced in Bitcoin, doesn't make sense to have other investments as much as it makes sense to have it in Bitcoin. And so, yeah, so I sold the apartment that had the extra room for my studio. And anyway, it's a good decision. Happy I did it. And I'm going to just keep moving forward, just like you just take one step and you see what comes up, and you kind of led to where you're meant to go.
That's quite a leap. That's awesome that you did that. Good for you.
Yeah. So tell us, how has Bitcoin changed you?
I feel like it's given me purpose in a sense. Before Bitcoin, leading up to, you know, 2024, I was feeling really burnt out. Just felt like I was in this like hamster wheel, not getting anywhere. And of course, there's things like inflation and external factors to thank for that. But I just felt like I was always just in this vicious cycle of just paying bills and not really getting anywhere, just maintaining the household, so to speak. Um, but with Bitcoin, I think this is the first time I'm like actually genuinely passionate about something. Like it almost like reignited a fire within me, that's kind of spread to a lot of other aspects in my life. I think I'll always be pro Bitcoin, of course, but now I'm wanting to just learn and discover more and just find out like who I really am. And so Bitcoin helps start that. Bitcoin, of course, doesn't completely define me, but it's thanks to the Bitcoin technology that I have this fire again to like go live life. And of course I have the best savings technology ever behind me while I do that. But I'm doing a job, and of course I'm very blessed to have it. It keeps me working remotely at home with my family, my children. So I'm very blessed for that. But it's because of Bitcoin now that I want to go pursue more. And so I don't know exactly where that is going to lead me. I'm very open-minded. I'm very nomadic in that sense, where I'm just open up to the will of God, honestly. And so right now, where I'm leaning, I'm actually thinking of maybe exploring a little bit of programming, maybe learning Python. That seems to be I guess a very fundamental language when it comes to AI, because I think we're all heading there in the future. So I think we need to jump on board that one too.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Definitely. I, there's so much when you're trying to do any kind of work from home or work for yourself without the help of AI, it's almost impossible. So
Right.
we do need it. You're also good with wallets. You taught now that you self custody, and which wallets do you like?
Uh, so I have two right now. So I am a big advocate for, of course, self-custodying your coins. I think if you need to leave a small amount on exchanges, but you should not leave your life savings there. There's a lot of reasons for that we can get into later. But the two wallets I use a hot wallet. My favorite one is Aqua Wallet, and that one's on my phone. Um, that is my spending Bitcoin, which to this day I have not spent any Bitcoin. So I have a small amount of sats on my phone that if I wanted to participate in the Bitcoin economy, I can definitely do so at any given moment. A hot wallet, of course, should only be used for not your life savings. This is spend and replace style sats. And then my cold storage is Jade. And so I have my little, wanted to bring it out. I'll show you guys my little Blockstream Jade, if I could close this box. But that's what I use.
That is
That
cool.
that keeps my keys, and this is for the Bitcoin that I will never spend.
Wonderful. Yeah, and you keep that safe. So you mentioned not keeping it on exchanges. tell us why.
Well, the reason why and if you might be familiar with this, of course, but if you don't know, it's the rug pull aspect. You know, there's a lot of exchanges out there, and from Bitcoin Pass where they were fraudulent or leaving your Bitcoin on the exchange, and perhaps something happened, especially with some type of centralized thing like an exchange. You can put money and years into Bitcoin on those platforms, and then they're shut down, and now you don't have access to your coins. So that's like the main reason. It's the rug pull aspect. But I think it's just generally better just to self custody your coins. It seems a little daunting. It's really not. The first time you go ahead and transfer to a hot wallet or cold storage, it can be daunting. But once you do it once, it's actually pretty easy once you know the fundamentals. But I just think it's really paramount just to, as part of any Bitcoiner's journey, is just to self custody your coins at some point. Don't leave it on the exchange. It's good to leave it on there for a little bit, and you know, reasons being is things like UTXOs and whatnot. But again, maybe we can talk more about that later. But best to just take your coins off the exchange once you hit a certain threshold.
Do you think it has to get a little bit easier for more people to adopt Bitcoin?
I think on the cold storage front, yeah. But it's actually pretty easy to like access Bitcoin on your phone through a hot wallet. You know, it's daunting for the cold storage aspect, because if you make any mistakes, those coins are gone forever. There's no Bitcoin customer support that you can call to help you, you know? So you have to be really careful with cold storage. But I think with smaller amounts of Bitcoin, it's a little less daunting. And so I think it's on the hot wallet aspect and Lightning wallets now, which I'm still learning about. I don't know everything about hot wallets, but I do know how to get a little bit of Bitcoin on my phone through one of the many hot wallets. Aqua's, of course, one of them, but there's a ton. So it's whatever your preference is. But I think the hot wallet aspect, it's pretty easy, you know, especially with Lightning addresses and whatnot. But the cold storage stuff, I think, is a little daunting to the everyday person.
Yeah, I think you're right. But it's one thing we love about Bitcoin, right? Because, like you mentioned, it's being self sovereign. So we're not
Mm-hmm.
relying on the banks to keep our money. And if I want to send money across the world, I don't have to tell them why or who or,
Mm-hmm.
pay a big fee. I can send it
Exactly.
within minutes. And so it's worth taking the little bit of time. And like you mentioned, it's always good to maybe send a small amount first to make sure you get the
Absolutely.
right wallets and you get some practice, and do it with somebody who you trust and who can help. Yeah. What else in the Bitcoin space have you learned? Did you read Bitcoin Standard? Any other books like that?
That's on my to read list. As of right now, I haven't really delved much into Bitcoin books. A lot of my learning comes from, you know, the various personalities and content creators in the Bitcoin space. And so I've been completely lame and haven't read. I should.
Not everybody's a reader. There's so much good information on YouTube. I think that's great. Is your brother still big in Bitcoin?
Oh, yes, he definitely is. Yeah, we chat about it every now and then. But yes, to my knowledge, he is.
But you don't have as many friends in your area. You've
No, it's
made
just my
some.
family. You're right.
Yeah.
It's just my family and I here in Spokane. And, you know, the connections that I've made more recently here in the last few months, I only expect those connections to grow. So I guess we'll see what the future holds in terms of networking and meeting more Bitcoiners. But I only expect that to grow. Like I was saying, we had a really great meetup done through the Orange Pill app through Pacific Northwest Bitcoin, and that was great. And I'm hooked. So I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we need these apps and these meetups, because in our own lives there's so few people who we can actually talk about, because people either get sick of it or they just don't get it. They don't have enough
Mm-hmm.
pain, or or they're doing pretty well in their lives, so they just don't need it right now.
I didn't think I needed it when I first started, because I was still a believer in the dollar. And so I think until we continue to see the printing, because we're going to keep printing, we're going to keep printing past the election, no matter who wins. That's something that's never going to change. There's just going to be continual printing of money to fund stuff that I'm mind blown about sometimes. And I think until people see that more, I guess, on a bigger scale, that their purchasing power is eroding away, or their money just doesn't go as far as it used to, and then they start looking for alternatives. And that happens at a different point for everyone. For me, it happened earlier this year. For others, it might happen a couple of years from now. Who knows? But I think everyone hits this point where just like there's something wrong, and I can't ignore it anymore. Like I'm awake to it now. And I think the one thing that most people will find is that Bitcoin's the answer, of course.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. And another thing, when price reaches 100,000, there's something about that more people will start paying attention.
I agree. Yeah, I think right now we're all drawn to the big number aspect, for the gains, for anyone who's not in the Bitcoin space. It's a money making opportunity. I've talked to a couple of people and they're like, they've mentioned maybe selling it in the future. And if that's your prerogative, that's your prerogative. But the number seems to be the thing that draws people. So, I do hope that it goes up, and of course it will, whether it's, 80K by the end of the year or 100K. I think we'll maybe see it more towards the 70s and 80s by year end. But I hope it goes up, but then also I hope it kind of stays the same so I can continue to get sats for cheap.
That's a good attitude. That's a good attitude. In the end, part of the orange pilling you mentioned, something else I like to tell people is learn about the 4-year cycle. Even if in the long run it's not going to be so extreme and crash as much, but it's good to know that you might buy now and pay 68 and it might go up to 120, but it might crash back to 60. We don't know. Nobody knows for sure, but just to be
Right.
prepared. That's why you kind of need that education, right? To know that Bitcoin is so much more than just number go up.
Right, absolutely. And I can appreciate the whole number go up and hodl culture. And I know you and I previously had a conversation over NOSTR. I I think hodling is important. Of course, it's a store of value right now. I think that's its main function, but I think we should also use it as the white paper intended, as peer-to-peer digital cash. And so I think you have to kind of find the balance of both. And I think a lot of the tax law in the United States is not very friendly to selling your Bitcoin or spending it. I know that it's a taxable event if you exchange it for anything, I think. But I hope we can get there and maybe get some more favorable legislation, because I think it is important to spend it, but I also think it's important to hold it at the same time. So you got to find the balance.
That's a very good point about the taxable event. Possibly on the second layer on the Lightning Network, but
It's not a
selling it.
taxable event.
Well, it's going to be interesting because if you just send somebody 2 cents, you know,
How do you tax that?
yeah, it's kind of
Right.
interesting. Yeah, but I think you're right. I hope we get some better regulation,
Right.
whereas it's more recognized as another money. It is sound money. Yeah, so that we don't have to
Absolutely.
get taxed. Yeah. So has Bitcoin given you a low time preference? In other words, you're less likely to spend on something you don't need?
Oh yes. My wife makes fun of me because I'm very I guess a stickler when it comes to money. But I think that's just my journey's just taught me that. And so yes, I would say I have a low time preference. I am completely okay with planting the seeds and waiting for harvest in a matter of speaking, 10, 20, 30 years. I've already resigned myself to the fact that I might very well not see, the world that, I want my children to have. So of course the Bitcoin is for them. They'll be Bitcoiners. I talk about it to them all the time, and they make fun of me, but it's all it's all for them. So I'm okay with waiting. I'm not in any rush. I'm not here to get rich quick. I'm just here to live my life and make connections and love and take care of my family. That's what I'm here for.
That's wonderful. And there's so many people doing things for the children now. The last person I interviewed, Shalale, she started a whole new company, Bitcoin Junior Club, to help kids learn about Bitcoin in a very nice way. And also there was Tally. Her whole mission is to teach children. And I spoke to somebody in Chile yesterday, Flo, and she does Bitcoin artwork for children's books, as well as there's so much going on. So the information's out there, and you're right. Your kids will probably know Bitcoin better than it'll be normal to them.
Right, absolutely. I definitely believe that we're coming there, and that might be decades away, but I think that is the trajectory. And I hope that there's a couple countries in the space right now that hopefully by their example, maybe some of that ideology makes its way here. You have El Salvador. I've been reading things on Suriname, and I think the presidential candidate there. I don't entirely follow what's happening there, but I know that there's a couple prominent voices in those countries that hopefully some of those ideas can make its way here.
And it might be sooner than we think, because depends how quickly they print.
Right.
Time will tell. In the meantime, we will continue to hodl and spend and replace where possible.
Yes.
So I often ask people, what does freedom mean to you? And I know we live in a free country, but what does freedom mean to you?
That's a tough one to answer. I think everyone, of course, is going to say something different, but freedom to me, I suppose, is just not, just being left to my own devices, my own will, in a matter of speaking. Being free from debt, that's a big one. Debt has become pretty big for me here. Not that I'm in debt, but just the idea of it. I think debt is a system that just traps everyone, and it has such far-reaching complications. So just to not be enslaved to debt, or these laws and regulations that just don't really put like the will of the people at the forefront. And so I think for me, as I was saying, to not be in debt, to just be able to love and take care of my family and make connections with people, and just really live in a world where we can just build. Something I've been getting really passionate about lately is just open source projects. And, in turn, that's kind of led me down the whole programming, idea that I had earlier. Just like, I want to be in that space and just help build something that's just going to make the world better. And if I end up going there, great. If not, I hope I find my purpose somewhere else. But freedom to me is just being able to just transact freely and just be with my family and my friends.
I love that. You mentioned debt, and it just made me think of your generation trying to buy a home, which, when I said I sold my place, I do have a home still.
Mm-hmm.
I just sold an investment property, but it is important to have a home. But going in debt where it's almost impossible to get out of, that's hard for the younger generations because of our depreciating money. Is that what you meant by debt?
Yes. So there's credit debt, of course. I think that's what I might have been more referring to. I think it's very easy to be enslaved by credit card debt. And I think a lot of it has to do with there's not enough financial literacy in the United States. I can't speak for other parts of the world, but I think financial literacy is they don't teach that. And it makes you wonder why they don't teach that, But in regards to the house thing, my family and I, we've wanted to be, home buyers for the last couple of years now, and it's impossible. in the market that I'm in, the asking price for houses is ridiculous, and there's no way they're worth that much. But it's not that they're worth that much, it just the dollars are worth less. And so, my wife and I have gone back and forth on what to do in the housing. It doesn't make sense to own something with a ton of liabilities. Okay, Bitcoin doesn't have liabilities, homes have liabilities, and I'd love to be a homeowner one day, but for a very modest family, that's not, there's no way we can cover those liabilities, so it's smart for us not to get a house. Is the house even really yours? It can be confiscated. We've seen that, so I would love to own a home. As of right now, it's too much of a liability to have one. And the only thing that isn't a liability to have is right now is Bitcoin.
You're absolutely right. When I bought my apartment, it cost 21 or 22 Bitcoin to buy the apartment in 2020. I bought it right before COVID started, January 2020, for 22 Bitcoin. I sold it 4 years later for about 8 Bitcoin. And they say in another 4 years, it's probably going to be 2 or 1 Bitcoin or even quicker. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I like to try to price things in Bitcoin. When I speak to Jeff Booth, he reminds me that most of us are thinking in fiat, and that fiat is just a no-win situation. And he reminds me that Bitcoin and fiat cannot exist in the same world, because Bitcoin is the free market is deflationary, and so
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin, everything is going to go down in Bitcoin. So that's good news for you, because you're in Bitcoin. So one day, if you did want to get a house, it could be half a Bitcoin or
Right.
less. So
Right.
stacking now and continue, that would be something that I would consider using Bitcoin for
I'm
in the
there
future.
with you, and I've heard that explanation before, the pricing in Bitcoin and how things go down in price when priced in Bitcoin. For me personally, I think I'm years away from maybe considering transacting largely with it, but I think I'm with you. I maybe might exchange it for a house. Maybe not. I'm not entirely sure yet. I haven't made up my mind, but I would never sell it. I would never sell it for what is essentially the melting ice cube that the US dollar is. It doesn't make any sense to buy Bitcoin with fiat and then sell it back for fiat. That's now even worth less than it was when you bought it. That cracks me up. I will never sell it for dollars.
I love that. That is a great statement right there. I would never sell Bitcoin for the melting ice cube of fiat money.
Right.
Yeah. So, well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been wonderful chatting.
Yeah, Paula, this has been great. Thank you so much for having me on. This is an amazing opportunity. I'm just blessed and humble that you reached out to me to have this conversation. So thank you so much for your time.
Well, I see you going far in the Bitcoin space, so just keep going.
Likewise.